Y'all, we live in difficult times. There's war, political unrest, the pandemic, poverty, families being torn, communities ripped by gun violence and people dying every day, police, injustice. It's all bringing so much pain. But y'all, we can look inside our minds and we can understand who we are, become better, and do this thing like we've never done it before. But it all starts with our mental health, and I know we can do it. I believe in you because I believe in me, and I believe in us. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Therapy is Life, where thinking, feeling, and experiencing well-being is what we do. Today, we're going to be talking about some African-American history. That's right. We need this ancestral knowledge so we can be our best selves, because how can we think straight if we don't know where we've been? So anyway.
You think about Andrew Johnson, during the Reconstruction. Once Lincoln was assassinated, he was like, we're not going for that. You know what I mean? So it was like there was no real push for protection, for all of those freedmen that became, and I'm talking about in the South.
Right, exactly.
Elected officials that became elected congressmen and senators in the South.
Right.
So you just in looking at the Reconstruction, that how the scales were still, unbalanced,
Exactly. And in fact, it feels like our history is cyclical, because it feels like as a result of the Reconstruction, we have Jim Crow come along, and it's like everything that, blacks gained through education, everything blacks gained through voting, all those things were taken away.
Yeah.
And have you heard about another city? I think it happened in the late 1800s, and it wasn't a black city, but Wilmington, North Carolina, where the blacks and white people came together, and they was able to create a government where they worked together, they lived together, they were doing great. Black people were becoming aldermen. I think the mayor of the city had become was a black man, and so the Ku Klux Klan came into that city and destroyed it and killed a number of people because of what went on in the city of Wilmington.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's not really where we're trying to go in this particular discussion, but it reminded me when we started talking about Reconstruction and what happened and how this was such a response to blacks actually emerging, or blacks and whites getting along,
exactly.
and breaking and moving away from that divide that was created to keep poor white people and African Americans and slaves from getting together and working for common causes.
Oh, yeah.
But anyway, man, look, we go ahead. What's that?
Okay, now we got where you want?
Is it Boley?
Boley.
Oh my God,
Boley.
This is one of my favorite ones, right?
Boley, and believe it or not, where it was actually Creek Indian territory. And so you had a lot of descendants of black slaves, and they were actually, believe it or not, held. And think about the word I'm saying, held, by the Creek tribe.
So they were prisoners of the Creek.
Kind of, sort of, you could say.
I thought I read into that, and I thought I was like, were they like?
Yeah, you got to think about the word held. So they were held. And I don't want to, because there's no real, even when I tried to look it up, that I don't want to say that they were like held as slaves, because who knows? Because we got to think also during that time, a lot of our ancestors purchased their other blacks, not to enslave them, but to bring them out of bondage. So
Exactly.
I just want to imagine, in my imagination, I just want to think of the Creek Indians as it's saying, held, actually kind of
Trying to help them
exactly,
move. And you know what?
exactly.
And thank you for giving that nuanced explanation, because I think oftentimes as human beings we want to polarize things. We want to make it this or that, but there's a whole lot of minutia in between, cacophony of ideas that's leading to a particular end.
Yeah.
And I thank you for clarifying that, because somebody might hear you say that and say, "Oh, they were slaves." No, but no, maybe they were just trying to keep them from being slaves.
Exactly. Because you think about it, they allotted them 100. The Creek Indians allotted these free, because they were freedmen.
Gotcha.
They were freedmen, so they allotted them 160 acres of land each.
160.
And as a result,
that's 4 times what they was gonna get from government.
Exactly. So that in turn with that, it established a township.
Gotcha.
Which, as it went on, created Boley. Now the town itself was established, and the land by a free woman, Abigail Barnett.
There it is. Another sister,
and she was a daughter of a Creek freedman. So the connotation in there, it was that she was biracial.
Exactly.
Of African and Creek Indian descent. So, and they were the black, the community. They were independent, very independent, and they had, based off of many black Southerners that eventually immigrated, and they preserved the town, helped to preserve the town. And we got to also remember, during that time when our ancestors were establishing these places, there were limited economic opportunities.
Right.
So you had, even within that area, you think about how during that time they were giving land to in the Oklahoma, in the Trail of Tears.
Trail of Tears.
Trail of Tears. So they were like pushing the natives further west,
Gotcha.
and Midwestern. So and of course you still had the Ku Klux Klan and discrimination laws. Kind of reopposed itself. That was during the collapse of the Reconstruction area.
Gotcha. And Boley is one of those cities that was on a railroad, right?
Yes.
It was a railroad stop.
Yes.
So Boley also had banks.
Yes.
And Boley had banks. It had sawmills. It had it had cotton mills, right? Cotton gins,
which was owned one of was owned by which was the principal founder was a freedman of Thomas M. Haynes.
Okay. Oh, he owned that. He was one of the. So when you was talking about the railroad, it was the Fort Smith and Western Railroad that came through there. So and so that kind of helped with. You got to remember, during that time, anywhere where there was like a shipyard or where the rail came, it brought economic opportunity. Exactly.
To that particular area.
Exactly. And they had 2 colleges there too, right?
2 colleges, yes.
2 colleges, yes. And they had one of the, I guess, majestic fraternal lodges, Masonic lodges.
Masonic, yeah. And actually, if you look at it, they also had started one of the very first black-owned ice cream establishments.
Oh, for real?
And it was called Electrical
Ice Cream. And that's what's up. I wonder if that still exists today.
And Booker T. Washington also visited there in 1905.
Nice. So he went there, and they also had their own electrical company. Boley, they was doing this, right?
Yeah.
And this was still pretty much like, electricity wasn't that it wasn't all over the place at this point in time. Everybody didn't have it, but they had it in Boley.
Yeah. But the sad case of it all, after Reconstruction and within the early 1900s, sad to say, Boley became one of what was considered, well, in that county where sundown.
Mm.
So there were certain places within that county where Boley was at that we could be there during the day. Become sundown, we had to go.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very a lot of rich history. And as I said, of course, November 16th in 1907, the Jim Crow segregation law were added to the Oklahoma State Constitution, which was largely due to the fact of how well off they saw Boley, different places like Boley were doing.
Yeah,
For black people.
And this is happening a significant amount of years before what was going on in Greenwood.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
right, exactly.
it's like, oh my.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my.
Now, I don't know if have you ever heard of Laura and L.D. Nelson?
No,
They were 1911. They were actually that tense atmosphere during that time. They were lynched in a nearby town, which I told you, there within that county there were certain places that became sundown, and they were lynched in Okama, which is the county seat for where Boley is. So yeah,
and that's another. So that's another one of those things, man. So I always have to say, so sorry for the families and the loved ones of those individuals that was lynched. But as a collective, man, that type of trauma, having to see those type of things, how it impacted, you know, our families. 'Cause when you start thinking 1907, I started feeling like, okay, my grandfather was living when this happened, and it was a small child, and being able to, live through times where these kind of things was going on, how that imprinted upon the way he thought about life. And then he may have taken some of those same ideas and imparted it upon my father, and then my father imparted some of those same ideas and beliefs on me. So it's like this this idea of this historical trauma that's come because of all this crazy stuff, man. And Boley was obviously another city, another place that was like had such a great history, and it has to be diminished by all this pain and suffering just because Black people were doing their thing.
Yeah. And you mentioned the Masonic Temple, and actually the first Masonic Temple was actually constructed in 1912 in Boley. In 1912. So yeah. And like I said, in 1905, Booker T. Washington did a tour of the new, and actually, and again, they had their own newspaper. As we mentioned, they had a school, they had their own Masonic temple. So a lot of rich history.
Progressive, rich history there and everything.
Yeah.
Man, it's so amazing, man, and it's just awesome. And Boley still. So all the towns we talking about today, all these towns are still there.
Oh yeah,
They're still there. They may not be as big or as they are not as big or as productive as they was at that time, but they have survived despite many attempts to destroy them.
Yeah.
And economic challenges also.
Yeah.
So we had one more, and I thought you wanted to discuss, and that was in Maryland, right?
Highland Beach,
Maryland, right? Gotcha.
And it was actually founded in the summer of 1893, which is Reconstruction area, which was founded by Major Charles Redmond Douglas, which is the son of Frederick Douglass.
Look at that! Look at that!
Yeah. He and his wife Laura actually would visit Bay Ridge, which is a resort, Bay Ridge resort there in Maryland, but there was nowhere for them to stay. They still didn't allow Blacks to stay, so he actually established the resort there, and so it wasn't actually what you would call, and I'm sure it had its own what they call year-round residents that took care of the properties there, but it was actually really a beach resort for Blacks. during that time. So he bought like 40 acres, and it was actually on the beachfront of in Maryland.
Gotcha.
So it was beachfront property that he was able to purchase. He and his wife.
Okay.
And they actually were building, as they were building the lots and the resorts up, they also purchased a plot of land and they built a home for Frederick Douglass, but which he, in turn, it became his retirement.
Oh, so
retirement home.
let me, can I ask you a question really quick? When they was, when, what motivated, because I read that what motivated him to build this community was he had an experience where he went to a location, I think it was to eat or to, and they were rejected, wasn't allowed to eat there, and that, and his frustration was like, you know, look, and he was, because he was in the 54th Infantry, which the movie Glory was made
in
about.
Massachusetts,
in Massachusetts, 54th Infantry with the, so in his frustration, imagine being a veteran who's been in this been in war, and now you're still dealing with this issue of not being able to go places because of the color of your skin. And so, but he has some money, and so he says, okay, I'm gonna go buy this land, this beachfront property in Maryland.
And see, and where they were at was Bay Ridge, which is not, you know, within that same Maryland vicinity. That he and his wife went to go eat at the restaurant, and it was actually, the restaurant was inside of, you know, a part of the resort. And they were turned away, of course, because of their race. And so he had the gumption to say, you know what? Y'all don't want me to eat there? I ain't got to eat there. I'll build my own, you know. And so that's exactly what he did. And actually, it's still in that's another place I would like to visit as well, especially with all the times I'm going to Baltimore and D.C. Would love to actually visit there.
I want to visit there too, man. It'd be nice. A lot of very famous people have lived in Highland Beach.
Booker T.
Washington, yes. Arthur Ashe.
I
saw that, and it was quite a few others, man. I was like, wow, man, that have lived there.
And actually, the Frederick Douglass house is still there.
Gotcha.
But I actually want to go and visit it, you know, visit there one day. And actually, just to know that, again, he had the umption to say, hey, you know, y'all don't want us there, you know, hey, I'll go buy this plot of land, you know, and just I would love to know how far it is from Bay Ridge.
Right, yeah.
You know, what is the distance between Highland and Bay Ridge?
Yeah, you know what, when I think about this, I mean, I appreciate this, man. I mean, and what you sharing with me, about Highland, I think in each one of these experiences, if you think about Brooklyn, Illinois, Boley, Oklahoma, Mounds, Bayou, and now Highland, each one of them, I think they show different strengths. You know, you can think about Brooklyn, obviously moving from slavery to freedom and being able to ascertain property and just trying to maintain being free. But you see Boley and you see Mounds, Bayou, you see these cities where they're actually building these cities, these communities. They have an infrastructure, they have banks, they have places for people to be educated. They're getting engaged in the political process. They're doing things, and they're doing it independently. And then you look at Highland, Maryland, this need to have recreation and have a place that we can go and have fun. And we were talking earlier about the Green Book, having a place we could go and have fun and have experiences. I think that's so amazing and for me, because with them doing all those things, they still were dealing with so much discrimination and prejudice, and they were dealing with so much stuff, but they still was rising as
yeah, and laying generational wealth. Because like with Bowie, of course it was at the time a resort. It does have year-round residents, and what's amazing, what I love about this story
you
is
Highland,
that
Maryland.
Yeah,
said
Highland.
Bowie.
I'm sorry, Highland. I'm Eddie.
Eddie. He said
Highland. And what I love about it is that a lot of the families that are the original families, their descendants still
are there.
Exactly,
so man.
That's what I love about this story of Highland.
Highland, yeah, exactly. And it's so important for us to take this. And you know what? This is something, and all of this, man, is like such important ancestral knowledge. Do you feel like when you read stuff like this, it helps your self-concept, your self-esteem, how you feel about you?
Yeah.
And why is that?
Right. Well, I mean, because it gives me a sense of knowing. I'll just say it just gives me the sense of knowing that, hey, you know what? There's no excuses. There's no excuses, because we think of all of the things that they went through to establish these things, and to make it even easier and better, just that much better for us, So there's no excuses.
There's no excuses.
We can always say the other is holding us back, but okay, in some cases, yeah, okay, let's say that's true. But if we can know our history, then we'll know that, okay, they made something out of nothing.
Exactly.
With all of the obstacles that they had to endure. You know what I'm saying? Because even at that point, they although they established these towns, they never knew when they were going to come and might burn it down. You know what I mean? So you never knew. Although you established something, you never knew what. So you had. I could just imagine them just living in a moment. I really do. I could just see them living in a moment, and also while living in a moment, looking down generations.
Exactly.
And hoping, that it's going to be better.
If we keep working at this. You know what? I feel the same way. I feel like when I see this, I understand the tyranny of racism and how it can be oppressive, but I also see the spirit of people who did not want to be oppressed, did not want to be locked in. I remember something I read that Frederick Douglass said that I always think is very important. He wanted to learn, but he couldn't go to college, but he said that books were not chained to college desks. So if he wanted to learn, he could still learn, because there was a printing press, and anything he could get in a college class, he could go and get it in a book, and he could read it. He didn't see that as an obstacle. I mean, he took the opportunity that he had, and I think understanding, despite the fact of all the stuff, all the challenges that we've gone through, the anathema that has suppressed us and kept us in such an angry place that we don't have to stay in that space.
And that leads me to a question I mean pose to you, or and just pose to anybody that may be viewing, is with all that our ancestors went through, and because as I said earlier, I'm a 60s child, so I had a time where I saw Black owned everything in the hood. So my question would be, how do we get back there?
Gotcha.
How do we accomplish our own utopia, so to speak? You know what I mean? Because as I said, everything wasn't rosy where in the hood I was, but it was, for me as a kid, it was a utopia. You know what I'm saying? Because I was able to see so many upward mobile Black people in the hood, beautiful old homes, still shopping and living. I think about my old elementary school and how, for the most part, the staff was, I would say, 75 to 80% Black. So I had those Black teachers, and there was a sense of pride and structure, So my question would be to anybody, or do we even want to go back do we want to repeat that of our own? Because nowadays we hear buy black, own black, and buy black. But what does that really mean, and how does that really look today?
You know, these are good questions that you asked, and I think definitely having a sense, no, learning our history, becoming ancestrally aware, seeing like what you talk about, how they were black communities that had black things in it, and how those communities worked, and then investing back in those in our communities in a way that creates that type of experience, even if it's not doesn't look exactly the same way.
Yeah.
But being able to invest in our black communities in ways that will allow it to grow. Because obviously, you know, there is the government systems that are out here, and they, you know, that can vary and change from administration to administration. But our love for ourselves, our love for our community, our engagement in our community, we've always been able to adapt and adjust so we can get things done. Now, I think one of our biggest dangers is we become apathetic. We only live in the moment, in the sense of not understanding our heritage, our history. So we forget about that. And so now we look at things only as it happens in the very moment. So it don't really bother us until it bothers us. Like we can hear things coming from administrations or coming from leaders and be like, oh man, that doesn't matter. But thinking, we're going to be all right, not realizing, no, we've been here before. Remember, ancestral knowledge is cyclical. We've been here before, and so we need to be prepared.
How did they come? Yeah.
Because we done got comfortable. We done got fat. We've been sitting in our houses eating sardines and crackers, drinking a 40 or whatever it is. We done got comfortable, not realizing, oh, all hell about to break loose.
Yeah.
So we got to tap back into that drive and that hunger to create that environment, because it's very necessary now that we do that. And it's not just for people of color, but I think it's for all the people that are economically challenged that step up and realize what's happening, so they can do what they need to do.
And I also think that it's going to take all of us to really present this history because as I told you earlier, I had my nephews to do a report, you know, and I told them, okay, I want y'all to do a 100-word report. Do the research, figure out what you're going to do. But as I told them, you can't do Martin Luther King. You can't do Frederick Douglass. You can't do Malcolm X. You can't do Rosa Parks, because those are the ones that the school systems teach you, so you know about those, you know, but there's other books and there's other stories that the school system is not, and if we look at what's going on now, they don't even want to teach it.
Exactly. It may be prohibited from teaching it.
So it's going to take our parents and our uncles, our aunts, you know, to instill that history, you know, and allow them to know. Because as I said, when my nephews did start doing their research, they were, and they kind of, I was like, okay, I don't want more to say like you're getting on my nerve, but they were knocking on the door, Uncle, such and such and such, and I'm like, yeah, okay, yeah, and so it kind of excited them to find these things out,
right? You know?
Exactly. So I think it behooves us to actually, and my Bianca. You know, when she found out I had my nephews do it, she's like, well, why didn't you have all of them do it? So even in that, now she's going to have her daughter, you know, and my other nieces get involved and do a report, you know, and do some research, you know, and you know, you'd be surprised. And like I said, my nephews and them, they were like tapping on my door like, hey, Uncle, I know such and such and such. Because they're not teaching us.
Yeah, intellectual curiosity. We got to tap into our kids' intellectual curiosity and get them to expand and see the world. And sometimes they may not understand the context of things when they're a child. But I know a lot of things I learned about history. When I learned it as a child, I didn't really understand the context of it. But when I got older, it became more apparent to me what it was. And so then I was able to like act on it, and it made sense. I think as a child, I had a lot of questions about the differences between like how some Americans lived compared to how other Americans lived, how black people lived, how white people lived, and some of those differences and some of the things people would say.
Yeah.
But then when I got a little older, it started to hit me like what this was really all about and how it got to be this way. And and one of the things that I always pushing, never let anybody think that you are less than them.
Yeah. Yeah.
When people create a system where one group or another group is less than another group, they do that because they have some insecurities about themselves.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate, as James Baldwin would say, in us trying to cultivate a different environment, we have to understand that anytime you suppress a group of people, and this might be why we go into the cycle, when you suppress a group of people in order to make yourself look better, you always have to find yourself above them. So when they move up, it makes you feel bad about yourself.
Exactly.
And now you feel like there's something wrong with you because they're doing better. Because you created a system where one group was beneath you. And so so to try to keep that up is hard.
It's hard.
So I think there's a deep sense where we want to see people as being equitable and give people the same opportunities. There's a part of us, but then when it happens, we don't like it because like, oh my God, they're actually better than us because we done bought into this faulty psychology.
Yeah.
And so now it's like we got to make everything go backwards.
Now, you coming from North Carolina, moving up north when your dad became our pastor. How was that? What was different for you that you saw in the South versus coming up north?
Oh my God, good question. Well, I always went to an integrated school.
Okay.
So when I went to school, it was always, they're very, very diverse, primarily black, white, right? And even in communities where there was primarily black people, the school I went to was always integrated.
Okay.
So one of the first things I noticed when I came to Ohio was the schools were not integrated. There was the east side where there was all, and then on the west side, it was different. And I was like, what? But of course, I was older then, so I also looked at things. So now, I'm right out of college. I'm just really being a student. And I see this, and I noticed it felt like there was clearly this differentiation between what was a black community and what was more like I would say the white community, and it almost felt like people didn't go on either side. Yeah. Where I was in an environment where there was more direct tension and conflict because people were forced. Yeah, and not always forced, but it felt like it many times. Like people were. We had to be around each other.
Yeah. And the reason I asked that is because we're at a point now, it's like a re-migration, of Northerners moving to the South.
Right.
Especially Charlotte and Atlanta is two cities that is like really like black folks is like from the North are migrating to.
Yeah, right. And people oftentimes ask me haven't I moved back down south? And so my life has been here. It's been fine for me. It's been good for me. But I'm always fascinated about those things, how people see it, because for different reasons. And usually people just say the weather's warmer.
Okay.
And that's what they'll say, right? The weather's warmer, and that's true. But maybe they haven't really considered the politics or different views, because you go to Georgia, you go to Texas, those are like two of the reddest states in America. I think the state of Texas has like over 5 million black people in the state of Texas. It might have the most number of black people
and
in
Dallas
the country.
Is a city that's just becoming up, just Charlotte and Atlanta.
Yeah, a lot of black people go there. But then there's a lot of things that happen in those places, and we have to be aware of that. But more things happen there directly. So being in the South, like just when I went to college, just being in the South, and somebody just calling me as I'm walking across the street, calling me nigga, or having experiences like that, or somebody saying something about my black friends. Now, granted, I was younger when those things happened.
Yeah.
I didn't have those kind of experiences I haven't had those kind of experiences in Ohio. Not to say I haven't had some uncomfortable experiences, but not like the ones I
undercurrent.
had. The undercurrent, not like the ones I had when I was in the South. And I also think that down there in many of those states, it's economy is oftentimes based on tourism, and it's starting to change. And so, like even during the pandemic, they were trying to keep things open in different places. Like a lot of that because much of their state wealth came from the tourist industry, not realizing like that was putting people at harm. But yeah, they did realize they was putting people at harm, but they had to do it. And so a lot of times people say it's just better down there in general, but economically, I don't know if that's the case.
Well, I think it depends. I mean, because I'll just say I know for sure for Atlanta, you have a great number of very wealthy blacks.
Right.
In that Atlanta, as well as in Charlotte, because Charlotte has become one of the banking meccas in the United States. So,
right, exactly.
Yeah, it's economically, and then you got to. I'm thinking at this point, I'll just go with my cousin Fatima, living down there in Atlanta, and she works for the post office, and as we all know, post office people, they make really good money, but how she lives in Atlanta, I don't think she would be able. How she lives in Atlanta, I don't think she would be able to live. She would still be able to live good, because I mean.
You talking about the cost of living there?
Yes, versus here, up north.
You talking about Cleveland economy compared to Georgia's economy?
Atlanta,
maybe
itself,
so.
Yeah.
Now, one thing I will say about like places like Atlanta and like we talk about Dallas and different places, some of those places, when we do good, we do well there.
Yeah.
However, there's still a lot of
when you don't do well, you don't do well.
It's still a lot of that.
Very much.
And so that you can go to some of the richest cities in America and then find those places have a lot of poverty and homeless people. Like what the fudge? Like how is that?
Yeah. Now you asked me about when I first went to Europe. I mean, actually, if I had my way and if I could get my mom. And she ain't trying to go nowhere. But honestly, if I could get her, I would be living in Europe right now.
Oh, for real?
Yeah, I would. And for me, and that's only because of my career. As I said earlier, they eat up anything artistically black.
Gotcha. Well, man, listen, we're gonna have to continue this discussion. Yeah. Listen, where can people find you, man?
You can find me on Facebook at Randall Travell. I'm also on Instagram at Randy the Psalmist on Instagram. So, yeah, those are two of the places that you can get me. And my email, icreatemagik@yahoo.com. Of course, I had to put the magic, and magic is spelled with the J. So that's CreatemAgic
Man, Randall Travell, man, appreciate you coming in with us today. If you like this very, I think this very good discussion around, all these small, little known black communities, please like us. So put your comments in the comment section. We want to hear. I know some people might ask, like, what does this have to do with psychology? But I think it's very critical. Our name is Therapy is Life, because the way we think, feel, and behave is rooted in what we believe about ourselves and about our collective community. And so the more we understand our history, the better we can challenge bad attitudes, beliefs, and things that influence our behavior. So it's not just about sitting in a therapist chair and exploring the inner you. It's about understanding how your environment shapes the inner you and being able to challenge that while you also work on the things that's unique to you. You have a good day. Like us and subscribe, and we'll talk to you soon.